Hello there, you're watching Eye on Africa now here on France 24. Our headlines for you. Acknowledging dissent in his own ruling party, Zimbabwe's elderly leader Robert Mugabe takes on his critics on the opening day of the Zanu-PF party conference. In Ivory Coast, the main opposition party is coming out of the wilderness, ending its boycott to take part in elections this Sunday for the first time since their founder, former President Laurent Gbagbo, was ousted. And the end of an epic journey flying the entire length of Africa. 15 vintage planes have touched down after a rally inspired by the first African aviation route from the 1930s. Thanks for being with us. I'm Catherine Norris-Trent. First, he's nearly 93 years old, but Robert Mugabe is planning to run for president of Zimbabwe again in 2018. And Mugabe hit out at his critics on the opening day of the Zanu-PF party conference on Friday, accusing some members of plotting to oust him. There has been growing discontent within Zimbabwe's ruling party, as well as the opposition now. Mary Columbell has more.
92 years old and still in power. In his speech at the ruling party's annual conference, Robert Mugabe accused some younger members of Zanu-PF of plotting to oust him. The party is expected to endorse Mugabe as its candidate for the 2018 elections, but some members feel he is too old and have decided to back other would-be candidates.
Some are saying, we no longer want Mugabe. So if you don't want him, what will you do about it when the majority in the party want him?
Africa's oldest leader has been in power since Zimbabwe's War of Independence in 1980. But he railed against fellow veterans who called him a dictator earlier in the year. Some even boycotted the party's annual conference, saying they no longer felt welcome. A would-be contender within Zanu-PF, the Vice President Emmerson Mnangagwa, fought for independence and could benefit from the veterans' support. The president's own wife, Grace Mugabe, has also gathered a lot of support to succeed him.
It's very difficult to imagine, given the intensity of this contestation, that Zanu-PF can survive in its present format. The only danger for the nation is that given Zanu-PF's history of violence, there's a real chance, real possibility that they will resolve those differences, those contradictions within themselves using violence.
These splits in the ruling party and Mugabe's waning support add to the pressure from the opposition. In the past year, they've organized many protests, furious at the dire state of the economy.
In Burkina Faso, at least 12 soldiers have been killed in what authorities there described as the biggest ever jihadist attack on the army. According to eyewitnesses, heavily armed attackers on motorbikes targeted the Nasumbu army base, which is in the north of the country, around 30 kilometres from the border with Mali. It's a base for troops, including a 600-strong anti-terrorist battalion. Gambia is set to be a key issue at Saturday's meeting of West African leaders at the bloc known as ECOWAS. They're calling for Gambia's incumbent president Yahya Jammeh to step aside and respect the results of the recent election there, which handed victory to his rival Adama Barrow. Ahead of the ECOWAS meeting, Senegal's President Macky Sall spoke to France 24. Take a listen.
I hope that President Jammeh will see sense and go along not just with ECOWAS, but also with the African Union and the United Nations with regard to the transfer of power between him and the President-elect. I don't think it's reasonable for President Jammeh and his allies to use force, but equally I think that we must respect President Jammeh and speak to him in a way so that he truly understands his defeat, so he must hand over the reins and he must help with the transition of power.
In Ivory Coast, the painful process of national reconciliation is still underway following a deadly post-electoral violence more than 5 years ago. But now the political process is getting new life. The Ivorian opposition is ending its boycott and will take part in Sunday's parliamentary vote. The main opposition party, the FPI, had refused to participate in previous elections after its founder, former President Laurent Gbagbo, was ousted in 2011, refusing to stand down. Our correspondents report.
Loud and proud, Ivory Coast's main opposition party is back. It boycotted the last parliamentary election held 5 years ago at the end of the country's civil conflict. Today, wearing the colours of the pro-Gbagbo Ivorian Popular Front, Isiaka Sankari wants to win big in Cocody.
We are from the political left, and we believe that the policies in Parliament now are right-wing policies, which don't take into account the expectations of the people. Unemployment is a common question, so is the rising cost of living, of education. This is the reality. There's the issue of healthcare, which still hasn't been addressed. We're here to make sure these questions are answered for the good of the people.
The ruling coalition party is presenting a united and confident front. It sent its heavy hitters into this contest. Like Afusiyata Bamba Lamine, many of the parliamentary candidates are government ministers. They want to hold on to their absolute parliamentary majority.
The RDR and PDCI political machines are with us and accompany us. And they are war machines. We will go to battle and we will win. On December 18th, we will celebrate our victory.
But another familiar face could thwart the main party's plans. The outgoing MP for Cocody ran last time under the banner of the presidential coalition. Now she's an independent candidate. As someone who often voted against the party line, she calls herself a progressive thinker. Her opponents label her a loose cannon.
For 20 years, what have we missed? We've lacked national cohesion. It was time to show that we can offer something else. Already, the fact that we are all representatives of different political parties, different religious and ethnic communities, is already a step towards the new Ivory Coast.
More than half the 1,337 candidates standing for Parliament are independents. They are the biggest threat to breaking the president's absolute majority.
Throughout 2016, there have been several drives to try and crack down on rhino and elephant poaching, a crisis that's killed tens of thousands of animals. Wildlife rangers have been turning to modern technology, drones, night goggles and automatic weapons in an increasingly high-tech battle against poaching. Take a look.
105 tons of ivory up in smoke. This was the scene in Nairobi in April this year when Kenyan authorities destroyed 16,000 elephant tusks.
To lose our elephants would be to lose a key part of the heritage that we hold in trust. Quite simply, we will not allow it. We will not be the Africans who stood by as we lost our elephant population.
Faced with an upsurge in elephant and rhino poaching, wildlife rangers across Africa are arming up. Canine patrols, high-tech equipment, drones, thermal cameras and automatic weapons. The fight against poaching is more and more like a war, which the continent says it can't win alone.
If the world wants to see species such as rhinos and elephants continue to persist in the wild, then the world would also have to help. I think it's unfair just to leave it to African countries and expect African countries to take care of that problem. This is an international issue.
According to the International Union for the Conservation of Nature, the African elephant population has dropped by over 100,000 in the last 10 years. Rhinos are even more vulnerable, with their horns sold for more than gold or cocaine due to demand in Asia. The illegal wildlife trade is worth about $20 billion a year, making it the fourth biggest illicit trade after guns, drugs and human trafficking. But while some African countries prioritise the fight against poaching, others believe there are more important problems like conflict, poverty and hunger.
Finally, it was the trip of a lifetime. 15 vintage aeroplanes have just landed after flying through the entire length of Africa. They took off from Crete in mid-November and since then travelled down through Egypt, making a stop off near the pyramids, following the Nile down through Sudan, then heading over Kenya, Ethiopia and the island of Zanzibar, via the wonderful Victoria Falls before landing this Friday in Stellenbosch near Cape Town. The rally was meant to recreate the first African aviation route drawn up in the 1930s, and all the planes dated from 1939 or earlier. Here are some of the pilots who completed the epic journey.
If you can get one of these to fly 8,000 nautical miles and still be going well at the end, I think that's the achievement.
Highlight two, besides Victoria Falls, was in Gora Gora, up at the top of the crater, landing there. So it was the oldest airplane to ever have landed at the top of the elevation there, and the oldest to take off too. Yeah, so I have an African record, I guess.
We landed at the pyramids, just by the pyramids, and that has not been done for 80 years. So that's one of the highlights of the trip.
Well, that's it for Eye on Africa. Stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up soon. We're going to leave you on some of those pictures from that vintage plane rally.